My hand jerked as the manager's voice cut through the blur of machinery. "That's it, this was your last shift." His words clanged louder than the plant bell, echoing in the brittle morning air. Grey light oozed through the frosted windows, dust dancing in weak beams. The others had already filtered out, knuckles red from the press, shoulders hunched against the cold. I pulled off the grimy work coat and tossed it on the table. Its yellow patch, Morse Plastics, looked sickly against the pale metal. "Go on then," he said, his arms folded. "You've always had your head in the clouds." I didn't trust myself to reply. I should have begged for another week, but the words tasted bitter. I pushed through the heavy doors, swallowing the ache in my throat and blinking against the harsh blue dawn. Outside, my breath hung in the air. The street stank of spilled diesel and the metallic tang of winter. Everything felt unspooled, unsteady, the anticipation of a new story, except I was the one at the mercy of the plot. I passed the corner shop, metal shutter humming as Mr. Patel pulled it up. He clocked me and gave a sad, knowing nod. I must have looked like every sacked shift worker tramping home with empty pockets and a head full of impossible dreams. My boots slapped the pavement home to Walthamstow, every step punctuating the doubts. Once my father had caught me reading an article cross-legged on the kitchen floor, the paper spread open. "Bloody hell, Joe. You think some pen and notepad will pay your way?" He clattered a mug by the sink, then disappeared into the living room. That was years ago, but the sting never really eased. I came into our small flat and found my sister Maddie at the kitchen table, unwrapping a sandwich for her school lunch. "You're back early," she said, voice small. "Yeah," I shrugged. "They let me go." She frowned, hair tied in a messy bun, and set aside a half of her sandwich for me. Did you ask Dad if?" "No," I lied, biting into the bread to fill my mouth, hoping she wouldn't see the edge in my eyes. She didn't press, we both knew it was useless. Dad wouldn't even be up yet. The works ran him ragged, body slouched into the settee, chasing cheap TV and shadows of hope. I eyed the slim envelope on the table, a bill. I turned it over to hide the red print. It was loss, pure and simple. Those first weeks I drifted between tiny jobs and hollow hours at the library. Through the blustery months I typed furiously. I poured everything into articles I submitted to small rags nobody read: subway accidents, corner shop heists, council tax hikes. Each piece was a plea, a testament in plain text. No one replied. Even indoors, I wore 2 jumpers to keep the cold at bay. My dad grunted at me over dinner, watching me scribble notes on supermarket receipts. "You need proper work, Joe," he said, not raising his head. I poured my yearning into quiet, late-night research, the world shrinking to the pale glow of the kitchen overhead. Maddie, 10 and already sharp, sometimes sat across from me drawing, her pencil furious on the page. "You think anyone will ever care?" she said once, chin up, feigning disinterest. I didn't answer, I couldn't, but I kept at it. That was the only thing that felt real. I tracked down stories no one wanted. The traffic wardens shaking down van drivers, silence after a school fire left a dozen kids in hospital, the migrant cleaner sacked after exposing mold. I published under fake bylines on independent websites, carving out a voice in the thick electronic fog. My friends drifted away one by one, stifled by shifts or children or the slow numbness of disappointment. It didn't hurt, not in the way I'd thought. Loneliness became a structure I could live inside. People talked. At Christmas, after the Queen's speech, my aunt handed out her usual spiked punch and eyed me with dry pity. "What's Joe up to these days?" she said to my mother, as if I wasn't there. "He's still writing bits," Mum said, a waver in her smile. Then to me, "You are looking, aren't you, for real work?" I speared a potato and let the scrape of fork on plate fill the answer. Dad watched silently, eyes hooded. The message circled the table, too heavy to speak aloud. "Dreams are nice, but you need to eat. Hash." In the afternoons, I walked along the canals, feet crunching on gravel, brain chasing headline shape and story hook. I tried to ignore the faces behind half-drawn blinds, the laughter that poured out of neighbors' houses. I could hear the tide going out on my youth. I pressed on. One April, a message came through from a struggling web journal. "We liked your piece, can we publish it?" I stared at the glowing text, heart thundering. Payment was a tenner and a byline. I sent the piece and waited. After it ran, I emailed my father. "My name's in print today." No reply. Instead, at dinner, he dropped his fork, lips pressed to a thin line. "Print's dead, Joe, you'll have to let it go." But the world outside kept turning. Sometimes people read. A former union boss found me and shared a lead about misused public funds. It was the biggest thing I'd ever touched. I reported for weeks, fingers clattering over stolen library computers, meetings in drafty back rooms of cafes. I fact-checked until my eyes burned. The Journal ran the story front page and a councilman resigned a month later. "Won't fix the mess, mate," Dad muttered when he glanced at the clipping I left by the kettle. "The lot of them are crooked." Still, Maddie clipped it for her scrapbook. The years blurred, rent paid by temp shifts, then freelance gigs for small papers. I moved out, just a room, Southwark sun stuttering through the blinds, a mouse in the wall. Still better than nothing, I covered slum landlords' NHS strikes, the price of day-old bread, insults from family arrived like clockwork on holidays. "Couldn't you do something proper? Journalists get everyone in trouble. Why not teach? So-and-so's boy is an architect now, why not you?" Bitterness welled up slow and persistent. But I steeled myself, convinced that reputation would mean more than bread eventually. Then an email from the Globe weeks before Christmas: "Your reporting has grit. Would you freelance a long-form article for us?" I read it twice, heart fluttering like a moth in a jar. The Globe was the real thing, the broadsheet we used to line cupboards at home, dismissive and unreachable. My pitch: an exposé on illegal London rental rackets. They said yes. I risked everything, spending days at hostels, interviewing the invisible. I wore cheap jeans and said little, tape recorder heavy in my pocket, images burning behind my eyes. Mold-blackened ceilings, mothers clutching kids on soiled mattresses, a landlord with slicked hair barking at the tenants in the drizzle. I wrote all night, sometimes squinting through fatigue. For a month I lived in scenes of loss I carried with me like stones in my pocket. The piece landed hard. The Globe made its Sunday cover, TV producers called, MPs tweeted outrage, new laws were debated. I didn't sleep that night, blinking into the silence of my freezing room. For the first time, Maddie called me, her voice full of awe. "They named you, they said you were brave, Joe." I pressed the phone close, letting her excitement fill the spaces where my doubts grew. Small recognitions followed, awards still in their cardboard boxes, speaking slots, a bigger flat. My father didn't say much, but when I visited, his mates would sometimes shout, "That's the journalist," as I queued for chips, and he pretended not to notice the pride pulsing just behind his tight smile. Yet resentment lingered, the old wounds never healed clean. When Mum died 2 years later, the house filled with cousins and chatter, memories swirling, unsaid regrets catching in my throat. Dad's hair was thin, his hands shaking as he poured tea. I eavesdropped on family talking in the kitchen. Still at that, reporting, makes trouble but never sticks around to fix it. Someone must, else the powers get away with murder. They lowered their voices as I walked in. Maddie hugged me and Dad nodded, but there was an invisible partition. They knew but they didn't really see. One winter morning, rain hammering like pebbles on glass, my phone flashed a new number, the BBC. They wanted me on the radio to discuss my latest investigation, a meatpacking plant scandal with links to our own corner of East London. It felt circular, a return to the factories, the violence of dawn. But now I'd bear witness on a national scale. I called Dad and hesitated. "Day after tomorrow, 8 p.m. tune in, yeah, if you want." He grunted, not promising. I rehearsed answers, fighting shakes in my hands. On air, under the hard radio lights, I drew lines between the faceless workers and the corporations that ground them down. Afterwards, my publicist's phone wouldn't stop ringing. But the real reckoning came after, when the Globe asked me to speak at a local event in Walthamstow, celebrating outstanding community achievement. Just a church hall, musty and peeling, set out with plastic chairs. My name on the placard felt strange, too weighty and fragile at once. As I arrived, the crowd blurred, old teachers, shopkeepers, neighbours I hadn't seen in years. Dad was in the second row, wearing his worn blue jacket. Maddie engulfed him, younger cousins buzzing with anticipation. The MC ran through a tedious list of local sports teams, then called my name. As I climbed the stage, I recognized the sneer of my cousin Will, arms folded, whispering to his brother, "For writing next it'll be stand-up comedy." I gripped the pew for grounding. Maddie's eyes were bright. I told them about the workers, the mothers' dennied shelter, the silence that covers suffering when no one bears witness. I described how one quiet voice, the kind that starts as nonsense, a pen and a notepad, could chip at the walls built by indifference. I told them I'd once been laughed out of factories for dreaming, mocked at this very table. Then the mayor stepped forward, placing a thick envelope in my hands. In recognition of honest reporting, it wasn't the money, it was the town's seal pressed into wax, something official, something blood ties alone couldn't grant, Maddie whooped. In the back, my dad's voice cut through the clapping. That's my son, Joe, to no one in particular. Later, family shuffled up, awkward but awed. My aunt tried. We always knew you had something in you. Others nodded, uncomfortable with what they couldn't undo. Will muttered, didn't think you'd pull it off, mate. Fair play. When the crowd thinned, Dad and I stood outside, breath fogging in the dark. I couldn't see it, he said, voice rough. You lost so much, but you kept at it. That takes something. I put my hand on his shoulder, both of us shivering. It was never about being right, I whispered, only about not wasting my voice. He nodded, face crumpling, and I saw the worry lines softened into pride. Paid taxis crawled past, scattering puddles. I watched Maddie in the orange glow, hugging an award, her laugh drifting clean into the cold air. Above us, the moon slipped through the clouds. I could go anywhere now, newsrooms open, editors waiting. And yet it was this small stretch of London concrete, this battered hall and my family's quiet shock that felt like the finish line. For once, acceptance didn't need to be asked for. It grew cautiously out of everything I'd worked through and everything I'd survived. The morning would come, bringing new shifts, more arguments, more stories. But the doubt, the lonely frost of it had finally melted. I turned toward home, the light in the kitchen window drawing me close. I'd come back, yes, but I carried the city, its wounds and its hope, stitched into every word I wrote. And for the first time, as my father glanced sidelong at me, I knew he saw it too.